welcome to Traditional Painting the Digital Way. This is where I use digital painting apps to teach traditional painting techniques. This is part 2 of my Southwest Saguaro series, and in this video we're going to finish out the details on the cloud and work on the distant mountains. If you're following along with your acrylic paints or any other traditional materials, check out part 1 for my list of all the paint and the brushes and the colors that I use. The app that we're going to be using is ArtRage 5 for Windows. And we're going to go ahead and start working on the clouds again. We're going to try to get the clouds a little bit more detailed, and so we're going to start by adding in the lighter colors, and we're going to add light pinks. And if you're using your acrylic paints, you can use cadmium red light for this with white acrylic gesso and throw in some cadmium orange, and that will give you kind of a salmon color. And here I'm just adding in a little bit of that on the bottom and using the instant blur brush, and that in ArtRage 5, and that gives it a really nice fluffy edge here. And then here I'm trying to add a little bit more of the blue background back in. And so I'm smudging it out and just trying to make it look like there's holes in the clouds right here. And then I'm adding a little bit of a lighter gray color, light brown gray. Probably you can use burnt umber for your acrylic paint. And add a lot of white acrylic gesso. And then you can add light violet colors in here, and we're trying to make thin wisps of the clouds here, and that gives it kind of a 3D look when you make the thin wisps of the clouds and make them go over the top of your background clouds. And here I'm adding yellow for the edges of the clouds just to give it that lining where it looks like the sun's rays are hitting. And you can use cadmium yellow light and use your script brush if you're following along with acrylic paint. And just go ahead and kind of add little bitty thin wisps of clouds and broken edges on the clouds here. And sort of keep them soft. Keep them smudged in here. And I'm going to go ahead, and I've been using my number 2 round brush from the basic oil brush set, and as I said in my previous video, I downloaded these from the ArtRage forums where they have user members or whatever. The forum members can make the brushes, and then they give you a link or whatever where you can download the brush packs. Also, ArtRage has some brush packs that you can download from their own website. And I'm working on the broken edge of the clouds here, just trying to get, you know, the look of the fluffy clouds. And go ahead and make sure that it's a broken line. Don't make a solid line. And you can use a really light color for this, but I'm still not using a pure white color. I'm just using kind of a light yellow or a very light tan. Kind of a light orange, just to give it the silver lining that clouds have. And then here I'm adding a little bit of some dark pockets on the clouds here, and I'm using kind of a burnt umber, probably, if you're following along with your acrylics, and just making again a really broken line and a broken edge. And we don't want real solid lines here. We're trying to just give the impression of the wisps of the clouds floating around each other, and you want to do that same thing with your white liner there. So just go ahead and put that in, smudge it, but don't smudge it completely out now. We're starting to build up some detail on our clouds, and we kind of want to have the edges against the dark parts of the cloud to be a little bit more solid, because this gives it the the form and the shape of the clouds. Towards the general mass of the clouds, you kind of want to soften the bottom of them, but the tops where they look real billowy and puffy, you want those to be a little bit of a hard edge. And then here, this is the reason why I always add a layer when I'm adding a different color of my cloud, because it kind of blends funny. And right there we got kind of a green color that it's not a big deal that you've got it, but I don't really want it to be a major color, so I'm kind of just smudging that out and adding a little bit of a violet color over it. And just go ahead and add a little bit of the violet back in there and make it look like that's a big wisp right there that goes in front of the yellow part of the cloud, and you can smudge it in. The blurred frosting brush works really well for the clouds or just instant blur. They work really well for the blending, and if you're painting along with your acrylics, you can use a paper towel or use your finger or a dry brush. And same thing if you're painting along with oil, you probably would want to use a dry brush and make your paint kind of thick. So here I'm adding an even lighter highlight, and it's still not pure white, but it's white acrylic gesso mixed with cadmium yellow light for those painting along with acrylics. You just want a kind of an off-white color. And I'm smudging it at the bottom, but I'm leaving kind of an edge at the top because you want to try to get more of a format now for your clouds. Kind of, you know, you want to show the form of the clouds. So I'm working on making some of the edges all billowy looking and puffing out there on that really bright spot in the clouds. And that will show that the sun is hitting the edge of your clouds. And go ahead and add a little bit of some thin wisps with orange color, and for those using acrylic paint, that would be cadmium orange. I like to use that color, or you can use, there's some other colors of orange, but that one's the best kind for me that I like, because you can mix it with other colors and get several different combinations. And so just kind of smoothing the clouds out a little bit, but I'm not taking away all the edges this time. We're kind of keeping our edges a little bit. I'm adding in a little bit of dark here, shaping the edges just a little bit there. Adding in pockets of dark and light. That's basically how you build clouds, is just keep adding in pockets of dark and light with your different colors. Use your photo reference to see where you want to put these colors. And like I said in my last video, don't be afraid to punch up the colors to make them a little bit brighter. Bring out those colors that you see in nature and just kind of bring them out so that you can tell that they're really, you know, not just a dull gray look, but there's purples in those clouds, there's blues in those clouds, there's browns, there's oranges, pinks, yellows, there's all kinds of different colors in those clouds. And then here I'm darkening the upper right hand side of my painting a little bit so that it will show up against the oval, because we want this to have the oval shape. We don't just want the same color as the blue that we've put as the canvas color. So I'm using the glazing brush in the basic oil set, and if you're following along traditionally with your acrylic paints, you want to make a really thin paint mixture and just kind of brush it on right there at the top. And you can use ultramarine blue for that, just a really thin glaze. And that will darken that top part there, and it will stand out against your background color that you've got for your canvas. So here I put this in docking mode, and this is a new feature of ArtRage 5. And what docking mode does is it puts everything on the top bar. And you can go ahead and you still have a few floating layers, or you can dock them to the side of your screen. But what this does is it kind of clears everything out so you can actually look and see what you're doing with your painting. It's kind of like the step back. If you're doing this traditionally, you step back and you look at your painting. And so that's what I've done here. And it works well for looking and seeing what you've done so far in your painting. But I still like the traditional setup much better because it's just easier to reach the tools. But here I'm adding in the distant mountains, and you want these to be kind of a light blue or a light purple. And I'm using probably a ultramarine blue and mix it with dioxazine purple for the acrylic painters that are following along. And what you want to do is get some good shapes to the mountains, and I picked another photo reference from Pixabay for the mountains because I liked the look of the distant mountains in that photograph. And so this whole picture is going to be a composite of a whole bunch of different pictures that I found from Pixabay, and these are all royalty-free pictures. So here I'm using the round oil brush, and then the next layer of mountains is going to be a little bit darker. And if you're following along traditionally, you can use your number 6 flat brush, will work pretty well for this. And you want this layer of mountains to be darker. And this is called aerial perspective. And that's where, you know, things look lighter in the distance, and as they come closer to you, they get darker. So that's what we're showing here with these mountains, is where each one that comes closer to you is going to be a little bit darker. So you'd throw in more blue or more purple or a little bit of brown. And then here I'm just kind of blurring the edges of the mountains, because if you're painting traditionally, you definitely don't want a hard line for your mountains because it's hard to paint over it. So here's the end of part 2 of our Southwest Saguaro series. And in part 3, we're going to be working on the middle ground, the foreground, and we're going to start working on the saguaros. So thanks everybody for watching. Thank you so much for your support. If you have any questions, just leave them in the comments down below, and I will catch you later.